Well, today I'm going to meet a gentleman who's been a television producer and director for practically all of his working life. He started off by producing a programme called Ripping Yarns, which was written by Michael Palin. He then went on to produce The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and also a quiz programme called Call My Bluff. But his biggest claim to fame is producing and directing TV's longest running comedy series, Last of the Summer Wine. The gentleman's name is AlanJWBell. Well, hello, Alan.
Hello, Martin.
It's very nice to see you. And I understand you're here in Scarborough for part of the 2013 Literature Festival. And you're giving a talk called Last of the Summer Wine from the Director's Chair. So we'll talk more about that in a little while, if we can. But perhaps first you could tell us a little bit about how you first got into the TV industry.
Well, I've always slightly skipped around that, but the reason is that when I was 15, I jumped school. I hated it. I hated education, which most people say, you can't say that. But I did. And my hobby had always been going to the movies. I loved cinema. And there's a film called Cinema Paradiso. Have you ever heard of that?
I haven't.
An Italian film. It's about a little boy that goes around collecting cuttings of film from the cinemas. And he eventually works in the cinema and he eventually becomes a director. It's my life story because that's what happened to me. I just loved the cinema, going to the movies. We used to call them the pictures in those days.
Yes.
And to me it was a wonderful land of make-believe. And I used to, with a friend of mine, make amateur movies, and some of them got awards and some didn't, but a lot of experience with amateur filmmaking. And then one day, and let me just say that I got a job, like a lot of people do for security, when I left school. My parents insisted I went for a job as a clerk. And they gave me the job, and I came out and I looked at this terribly grey, boring building, and I thought, I'm not going to spend my life going to work there. And I was sitting on the bus, and the bus pulled up alongside a cinema, and I looked down there and I thought, that is the entrance to this wonderland. And I got off the bus. It hadn't really stopped. It only just paused in the traffic. And I banged on the glass, and the manager came out, and I said, do you ever employ people as projectionists or such things? And he said, yes, when can you start? And I said, tomorrow. And it was like that. And I think I spent 5 years there making amateur movies and having a great time. Mm-hmm. And then one day, there was a magazine, it's not published now, called the Kinematograph Weekly, which was for cinema exhibitors.
Right.
Who would read the reviews of the latest films so they could pick them for their cinema. And there was an advert from the BBC saying that the BBC is looking for applicants for the post of film assistant class 2 at their newly purchased Ealing studios. Well, I thought, I have no chance, but I leave school at 15, not a single certificate or anything. And I'd filled up the form and they asked me for an interview, and I thought, this is marvellous. The BBC, remember, this is 40 years ago, the BBC, 50 years ago. I'll tell the truth. 50 years ago, and the BBC was like, an institution. And
it was iconic, wasn't it?
It certainly was. And I got an interview, so I went down to London. I thought, and I was in Scotland at the time, by the way. I went down to London, and there was this group of people around the table and just me in this room, and they asked me questions about education. And I said, well, I didn't really feel I needed it because I felt more inspired just doing my own thing. I thought that'll put them off. Then one of them said, if you got the job, how would you see yourself in 5 years' time? And I said, as a director. And I thought they would love it. They said, oh, and they all wrote down that. And I was astonished to get one of the jobs. And I think it was because of all the amateur movies that so I suppose in a way I've been doing amateur movies ever since, but getting paid for it. What's the difference between an amateur and a professional, for goodness sake?
It sounds very good. Yeah.
Anyway, that's how it's happened.
You were probably best known for your involvement in Last of the Summer Wine, which was TV's longest-running comedy series. Would you like to tell us a bit about that?
Well, yes, it's complicated.
I'm sure it is.
Well, basically, what happened was I had worked my way through being a film editor at the BBC to becoming a production assistant, and I directed sequences with Morecambe and Wise, and I produced the Crackerjack series for 2 years.
I remember.
And then out of the blue, I was given Michael Palin's Ripping Yarns to do. And they got a BAFTA award, and that means that you must be doing it right. And so I did Ripping Yarns. Then I did The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which was much appreciated by most people, and they've made a film of it since, and in the ratings, the appreciation index, it doesn't do as well as the TV version.
Really?
I think the TV version was right. I'm not saying it was terribly well done, which it was, of course, but the film lost a point, I felt, but there you are. So I went from Ripping Yarns to Hitchhiker to Last of the Summer Wine, which seemed illogical to me. You know, you've gone from outer space to something that couldn't have its feet more on the ground than Summer Wine. I mean, there's a program which relies entirely on what is there. I mean, it's that wonderful countryside that you get in that home valley. And I couldn't believe my luck when I was given the series to do. I thought, this is really me. Because one of the things I used to do for Crackerjack, you probably don't remember it.
I remember Crackerjack, yeah, just.
But there was a silent film sequence that was made every week. And I used to write those because I loved the work of Buster Keaton and Shaq Tatty, who were great mime artists. And giving me Summer Wine to do allowed me to make use of that I was going to say skill, but let's say experience. And Roy Clark's scripts were brilliant. Roy Clark used to live in Scarborough. You know, he stayed here for quite a while.
Did he?
Yeah, he had a flat here. But Roy's scripts are magnificent. Now and then, Roy would write something like the truck ends up in a ditch. And we don't have any ditches in the home valley. There aren't any. It's a very rocky ground. I mean, there's subsoil on top, but most of it's a very rocky countryside. And I would adapt what Roy had written and put in the visual funnies, which I think was what producers should do. You take the script and you try and make it better. If it didn't work, then fire the director. But it's a great opportunity to be creative and probably hitchhike on Roy's back, because without Roy, you'd have nothing.
Now, you've written a book about your time with Last of the Summer Wine. Would you like to tell us about that?
Well, I think it was because it all came to such a sudden end. And people have written books about Summer Wine before. And there's a really good one by Andrew Vine, which tells the history of Summer Wine. and it's a very, very good book. But it didn't have it from my point of view. Because you can easily say you got in a car and you went off into the hills in a mood. Well, you want to know what the mood was. That's just made up, by the way. But I felt that the way Summer Wine was brought to a sudden end deserved talking about. And there's a little bit of BBC history as well, because I joined the BBC in 1958, which is, what is that? That's over 50 years ago. Is it? Yeah. And it was a time when there was only 3 channels. So there was, 2 channels. There was BBC and ITV. Yeah. That was all. Yeah. And I saw all the changes over the years. And by the time we did I took over Summer Wine, it had already been running for 5 series rather. And I was given this wonderful program, which I used to watch as a viewer, never for one moment thinking that anyone would be mad enough to give it to me to do. But when I got it, it was like winning the lottery. I mean, I can't believe it. Summer Wine giving me the chance to do it. And it was a very good marriage. And I know I'm being immodest in saying so, but I'm Roy Clark's greatest fan because nobody writes comedy like him. It's brilliant, natural comedies, no jokes, it's just funny remarks, dialogue skillfully crafted. And it gave me the chance to make sure that it was brought onto the screen in a way it should be. And again, I'm going to be immodest and say that the way I work is different from other people, other directors, because other directors tend to look upon the scene that the actors perform. How are they going to put it on television, they ask themselves. I'll do a wide shot, and then I'll cover that line on that, and I'll cover that line. The word cover, inverted commas, I don't do it that way. I think of the scene, as it will be on the screen. And it's because I've made films for 20 years before that. But whenever I read Roy's scripts, I see the film. And if I wrote down how I see it, it's exactly as it turns up on television. In order to get the laughter on the programme, we would show the films, the finished half-hour films, they were all film in the end, to an audience at Teddington Studios. And we'd put up a huge cinema-type screen, cinema-size screen, and have 360 people turn up to watch it and record their laughter. Now, Teddington Studios, people used to say they can't understand it because they were doing shows like Des O'Connor and situation comedies, and they would always overissue the tickets because you know that 10-20% of them won't be used because people change their mind at the last moment. But their summer wine always filled the studio, and it got to the stage where we had to go around the offices at Teddington Studios, finding chairs to bring into the studio. 380 people.
Gosh.
And they're all laughing. You see, now that is a major achievement that people enjoy the programme quite as much as they do. And one of the things that I noticed was the fact that it wasn't just amusing the older people. We had kids as young as 10 in the audience laughing at it. They all saw their own type of comedy that they liked best. And kids, of course, love the slapstick, and the adults enjoy the spoken humour.
Yeah. So this brings us to your involvement in this year's Scarborough Literature Festival. Would you like to tell us a bit about what you'll be doing?
Well, I don't know what I'm going to be doing. I have this really talented man, James Nash, who's going to ask the questions. He knows he knows the standard of literature by which everyone should be judged. For some strange reason, people have said they think the book's quite well written, and I looked at it again the other day, and here and there I really like to change sections which didn't seem to read terribly well. But I think what people do like is the fact that it's candid and it's interesting and it's relaxed and it's not punchy. And that's why I think the festival were interested, because I don't think they've had anybody who's written memoirs before. I might be wrong, but I mean, and I suppose it's good to have a little bit of red-nosed comedy rather than hard drama and hard novels about murder and things like that. So.
Right. Well, Alan, it's been a pleasure to talk to you, and thank you very much for sparing the time.
I've enjoyed it very much. I think it's great to come back to Scarborough. I used to come here on my days off while filming Summer Wine in Holmfirth, which is about 70 miles from here, something like that. And I really loved it, and I was so glad that I had nothing whatsoever to do with the filming of Summer Wine in Scarborough. It was 2 episodes, 2 really good episodes, but it gave me great delight not to have done it, because if I had done it, I'd have moved the whole unit here to film, because it's so nice.
Right. Well, I hope you have a good day tomorrow anyway at the Literature Festival.
Thank you. Well, it's not in the open. Even if it's a nasty day, we'll be all right. We'll have fun inside.
Of course.
Anyway.
Thank you.